It was one of those blistering afternoons at the local storage auction, the kind where the heat rises off the asphalt, and every bidder's sunglasses reflect the same mix of excitement and suspicion. I'd been to plenty of these before, enough to know that 90% of the time, you're buying other people's junk. But every now and then you get a story worth telling. That day, the crowd seemed different. There was this strange buzz going around. Whispers between regulars, quick glances at one specific door near the end of the row. Unit pound 247. The manager, a tall guy in a faded baseball cap, kept checking the lock like it was holding back something dangerous. That alone was enough to get me interested. When they rolled up the doors on the first few units, it was the usual: broken furniture, old mattresses, dusty boxes labeled kitchen in faded marker. But when we finally got to pound 247, the air seemed to shift. The moment the lock clattered to the ground, and the steel door screeched upward, I caught the first glimpse: a dim interior, with something big and bulky at the back, hidden under multiple layers of tarps and cardboard. The auctioneer rattled off the starting bid, $500, and instantly the bidding war began. A few regulars dropped out after $650. Another guy I'd never seen before pushed it to $900. My gut screamed, go for it. I jumped in at $950, and just like that, silence. I'd won. As soon as the paperwork was signed, and the crowd moved on, I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, a mixture of old oil, rubber, and dust. My flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing piles of junk stacked around the mystery object. I started moving boxes, everything from outdated electronics to stained couch cushions, and with each layer gone, the shape became clearer. There it was, a long, low silhouette, a muscular curve of metal. My hands shook as I pulled back the first tarp, revealing a chrome bumper that had dulled with time but still caught the light like it remembered its glory days. Round headlights stared back at me like eyes that had been asleep for decades. I yanked away another cover, and suddenly the entire front end of the car was there in front of me, a 1969 Dodge Charger. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just any car. This was a legend, a machine that had starred in movies, posters, and the dreams of gearheads for generations. The body was dusty, with a few patches of rust, but the lines, those iconic lines, were perfect. I ran my hand along the fender, feeling the cool metal under layers of grime. The tires were flat, the windshield cracked in one corner, but the Charger was whole. I opened the driver's door. It groaned like it hadn't moved in years, and the smell of aged leather and gasoline filled my senses. The seats were cracked but original, the steering wheel wrapped in worn black vinyl. On the dash, the old speedometer went up to 150 miles per hour, and a faded air freshener in the shape of a tree hung from the rearview mirror, like a relic from the last drive it ever took. In the glove box, I found something even stranger, an envelope with Polaroid photos of the car in its prime. In the shots, it was candy apple red, gleaming under the sun, with a man in aviator sunglasses leaning casually on the hood. On the back of one photo, in smudged handwriting, were the words, "To my first love, may you always run free." The real question was, would it run? I popped the hood, and my breath caught. The engine, a massive 426 Hemi, was still there, dusty, but intact. This was the kind of heart that made the Charger a beast on the road. I could almost hear it rumbling to life in my imagination. I called up my friend Eddie, a mechanic who owed me a favor. When he arrived and saw what I'd found, his jaw nearly hit the ground. We got a portable jump starter and some basic tools from his truck. The battery, unsurprisingly, was long dead, so we swapped it with a spare Eddie had on hand. We checked the oil, dark but not sludge, and dribbled a little fuel directly into the carburetor. "All right," Eddie said with a grin. Moment of truth. I slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and for a few seconds, nothing. Then, like a sleeping giant waking from a long slumber, the engine coughed, sputtered, and roared. The sound was deep, primal, and powerful enough to send chills down my spine. People from nearby units came running to see what was happening, drawn by the unmistakable growl of a muscle car reborn. The Charger wasn't road ready, the brakes were shot, and the tires were practically crumbling, but it moved. We eased it out of the storage unit into the sunlight, and for the first time in who knows how many years, it gleamed. Dust sparkled in the air around it, and the metallic paint beneath all the grime caught the late afternoon light like a memory coming back to life. As we stood there, a man in his 60s walked up, looking at the car with a mix of awe and sadness. "I used to know the guy who owned this," he said quietly. "He raced it, won trophies. Then one day, he just disappeared. Nobody ever saw him or the car again." I didn't know if the story was true, but it didn't matter. The Charger was mine now, and I knew one thing: it wasn't going back into hiding. I could already picture it fully restored, engine roaring, tearing down the highway like it was meant to. When I'd paid $950 that morning, I thought I was gambling on a mystery. Turns out, I'd bought a piece of history. And as the sun set behind the storage facility, painting the sky in gold and crimson, I realized this wasn't just a lucky find, it was the kind of discovery that changes the way you look at every dusty, forgotten door at an auction. Because sometimes, behind all the junk, there's a legend waiting for someone to wake it up. The next morning, I woke up with one thought in my mind: that charger. It wasn't just another storage unit win anymore. It had taken root in my brain. I couldn't stop thinking about the way it looked in the sunlight, the deep rumble of its engine, and that mysterious note on the back of the Polaroid. By 9 a.m. Eddie was at my place, coffee in one hand and a grease-stained notebook in the other. "We're doing this right," he said, flipping the notebook open to a checklist of everything the car needed. Brakes, tires, full fluid change, belts, hoses, you name it. He'd already made calls to a couple of suppliers and found a place that had period-correct tires and brake parts. We trailered the Charger to Eddie's garage, which looked like a time capsule from the 70s, posters of old racing legends on the walls, shelves stacked with chrome parts, and the smell of oil and gasoline in the air. As soon as we backed the Charger in, Eddie's neighbor, a retired drag racer named Lou, wandered over. The second he saw the car, his eyes lit up. "That's not just any '69 Charger," Lou said, circling it like a predator. "That's a Daytona package. See the mounting points under the back. Wings gone, nose cones missing, but the frame is drilled for only a handful of these were ever built." That hit me like a punch. If Lou was right, I wasn't just sitting on a rare muscle car. I had my hands on something ultra-rare, the kind of vehicle collectors would write blank checks for. We got to work. Eddie started by pulling the wheels and brake drums while I focused on cleaning out the interior. Under the seats, I found an old set of leather driving gloves, a couple of faded racetrack entry tickets, and a small brass key on a chain. The key didn't match anything on the car. That mystery would have to wait. Replacing the brakes was straightforward. The real challenge came when we drained the fuel tank. What came out looked more like muddy coffee than gasoline. No wonder the engine had been reluctant to start. Eddie flushed the system, replaced the fuel lines, and installed a new carburetor gasket. While we were working, Lou came back with a manila envelope. "Thought you might want to see this," he said, handing it to me. Inside were photocopies of old race results. One name kept appearing: Jack, Redline, Morrison, and every entry listed his car as a 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona, candy apple red. I grabbed the Polaroid from the glove box and compared it to the grainy black and white newspaper photos in those papers. Same car, same man. Morrison had been a rising star in the late 70s, winning local and regional races, until one night, he vanished after a big win. No one ever saw him, or the car, again. By late afternoon, the new tires were on, the brakes were bled, and the engine was running smoother than it had in decades. We rolled the Charger out of the garage, and for the first time, Eddie suggested we take it for a short drive around the block. Sliding into that seat felt like stepping into another era. I turned the key, and the Hemi roared to life, vibrating through the frame and into my bones. Eddie climbed in the passenger side, grinning like a kid. The first few feet were slow, cautious. The brakes grabbed well, the steering was tight, and with a gentle push on the gas, the Charger surged forward with the kind of power that makes you understand why people fall in love with cars. By the time we'd made a lap around the block, the sound of that engine had drawn half the neighborhood out onto their porches. When we got back to Eddie's, I shut the engine off and just sat there for a moment, soaking it all in. That's when I remembered the brass key. Something about it had been bothering me. I pulled it from my pocket and looked around the car. It didn't fit the glove box, the trunk, or the ignition. Eddie noticed my frown and said, "There's one place we haven't checked." In the trunk, under the carpet, there was a small, lockable compartment I hadn't noticed before. The key slid in perfectly. With a soft click, it opened. Inside was a metal box, about the size of a showbox, wrapped in an oily rag.